Look at this carnage. Frozen corpses littering the snow like discarded trash, and right in the middle of it stands a man who clearly thinks he's the main character. He's looking down at Ash, who's currently bleeding out and questioning his life choices. The guy does not even have the decency to hide his malice. He leans in, voice dripping with that classic arrogant entitlement, and drops the bombshell. Ash and his entire squad were not soldiers to him. They were just bait. Disposable, frozen meat left out to lure the enemy into a trap. It's the kind of sociopathic efficiency that makes you wonder why anyone follows leaders like this in the first place. But let's rewind, because Ash did not just end up here by accident. He's been grinding, clawing his way through the mud for years, all to pay back a debt to a man named Roderick. You see, in this world, if you don't have a fancy wing emblem pinned to your chest, you're nothing but a target for ridicule. Ash spent his days being the butt of every joke, getting sneered at by the so-called elites who think their status makes them gods. He took the insults, he swallowed his pride, and he threw himself into the most dangerous missions just to prove he was worth something. He was not doing it for glory or some noble cause, he was doing it because he was terrified of being worthless. He watched them whisper behind his back, watched them mock his lack of pedigree, and yet he kept showing up, kept fighting, kept trying to earn a seat at a table that was never going to let him in. He treated his loyalty like a currency, convinced that if he just sacrificed enough, if he just bled enough for the right people, the debt would be cleared and he'd finally be one of them. It's pathetic, really, the desperate hope that if you play by the rules of people who hate you, they'll eventually change their minds. But while Ash was busy trying to settle his ledger, he did not realize that the debt he owed was not just financial. It was a noose. And the harder he pulled to loosen it, the tighter it got, until he was standing there in the snow, realizing the only thing his hard work had actually earned him was a front row seat to his own betrayal. Now he's left with nothing but a broken body, the cold, and the realization that the man he spent his life serving was just waiting for the perfect moment to burn him alive. The first thing you notice when you wake up is not the cold, it's the silence. You look down, expecting to see your own hands, but instead you're staring at tiny, pudgy fingers. You look up and there she is, the woman who was supposed to protect you. She's staring at the sky with eyes that do not see anymore. She's dead. And you're just a snack-sized witness in the middle of a graveyard. The crunch of snow under hooves echoes through the blizzard like a death knell. Men on horseback are tearing through the whiteout, screaming for the woman and the child. They aren't just hunting, they're cleaning up loose ends for Duke Roderick. Every shout is a command, every passing shadow a potential executioner. They're closing in and they have no intention of leaving survivors. The realization hits harder than the sub-zero wind. These are not just random thugs, this is the past. That bitter, twisted history you thought you escaped has folded back on itself like a cheap suit. If they find you, your second chance at life ends before you can even stand up on your own 2 feet. You have to move, you have to survive. You drop to your hands and knees, the snow biting into your skin like needles of ice. You're not just a baby anymore, you're a desperate conduit for something ancient. You focus, drawing on the raw, chaotic magic sleeping in your veins. Veins of glowing, golden heat surge through your limbs, melting the permafrost beneath your touch. You're crawling, gasping, burning through your own stamina just to defy the freezing death that's trying to claim you. It's a rhythmic, agonizing push, heave, crawl, magic heat. Every inch gained is a middle finger to the grave. The world turns into a blur of gray and white, and then your strength finally deserts you. You collapse face first into the drift, right at the boots of a man and a young girl who look like they've stumbled into the wrong nightmare. A shadow looms over you. It's a man, Viscount Highfried. He stares down, his face a mask of utter bewilderment. He reaches out, scooping your freezing, pathetic form into his arms, his eyes scanning the horizon for the mother who is not coming back. He's shocked, unsettled, and clearly wondering why the hell a baby is lying in the middle of a frozen wasteland like a discarded toy. Your eyes flutter, and for a second the world shifts. You're not in his arms anymore. You're seeing a flicker of a memory, a different child, younger, reaching out to you. A vision of another life, or maybe just the fractured reality of a soul that's been through the ringer twice. You wake up, but it's not the peace and quiet you were hoping for. You're surrounded by a pack of children, and they've decided you're their new favorite doll. They're tugging at your cheeks, poking your eyes, and stretching your limbs like you're made of putty. It's complete, unadulterated chaos, the kind of toddler-fueled nightmare that makes you miss the blizzard. Panic sets in. You scramble, flailing your tiny limbs, and launch yourself away from the sticky-fingered mob. You're crawling with everything you've got, skittering across the floor like a caffeinated spider, the pack of kids screeching and stumbling in pursuit, turning the room into a high-stakes daycare chase. You're done playing, you reach deep into that reservoir of magic, feeling it spark and roar. You lift off, hovering a few inches, then a few feet into the air, but you've got the grace of a brick. The magic surges, snaps, and leaves you mid-air for a split second before the connection breaks. You plummet, spinning wildly, gravity reclaiming its prize as you tumble toward the floor in a flurry of limbs. Just before you hit the ground, a pair of hands snatches you out of the air. It's the Viscount again. He's staring at you now with something deeper than surprise, it's suspicion. He knows something is fundamentally wrong with the baby he found, and he's not going to let it go until he finds out exactly what kind of freak of nature he just brought home. You look up at his face and it clicks. The pieces of the puzzle lock into place with a terrifying finality. Viscount Hyfried, the older brother of Duke Roderick, you are not just in the past, you're sitting in the heart of the enemy's bloodline. The irony is almost enough to make you laugh. You wanted a second chance at life, but you've landed right in the lion's den. Now you have to decide, do you play the part of the helpless child, or do you start burning this dynasty down from the inside? The woman holding me looks down, her brow furrowed in that classic mix of maternal instinct and sheer unadulterated terror. She's staring at my hands, trying to reconcile the fact that a literal infant just defied the laws of gravity. It's not just a fluke, the air around me hums with a residual static that she can't quite name. She knows something is off, but she's too busy playing the doting mother to realize she's holding a tactical nuke in a diaper. Then comes the man. He doesn't hesitate, peeling back my layers with a cold, clinical curiosity. He gasps, actually loses his breath as he spots it. Right there on my skin, the mark of the seven-winged crest. It's a death sentence for some, a holy relic for others, but for him, it's a realization that the toy he just picked up is far more dangerous than he ever bargained for. I look down at the mark myself, tracing the lines of those wings while my brain screams for context. Suddenly, the world shifts. I'm yanked from the comfort of the indoors and shoved into a biting, snowy void. A heavy, gloved hand grips my collar, lifting me into the freezing air like a sack of grain. He's not looking for a baby, he's digging for a weapon. He shakes me, his eyes burning with a desperate, frantic hunger for power, demanding I show him the source of my strength. I don't flinch. I just stare back, cold as the frost biting at my cheeks. Back in the warmth, the woman pulls me close again, but the dynamic has shifted. The man is talking not to me, but to the future. He's calculating, weighing the cost of raising a monster against the payout of using me to settle his own bitter, bloody scores. He doesn't care about my well-being, he cares about the leverage I provide against his enemies. He sighs a heavy, performative gesture and pats my head with a hand that feels like sandpaper. He's committing to the bit. I'm officially part of the family now, he says, a promise wrapped in a threat. My eyes catch the light, flickering with a faint, unnatural glow that makes the other children in the room flinch. They'd been worried about me, trembling in the corner, but now they're looking at me like I'm a ghost. It's the perfect time to start learning how to weaponize their fear. The woman cradles me toward the window, the moonlight painting her face in silver. She whispers a name into the silence, Aster. It's a nice touch, a name for a star or perhaps just a target. 10 years pass in the blink of an eye. The grand estate looms ahead, a monument to old money and older grudges. I step out of the carriage, offering a hand to Ulfin. She looks regal, composed, and completely unaware that I'm the one pulling the strings behind her polished exterior. We share a look, a brief, silent acknowledgement of everything we've survived to get here. A flash of our younger selves flickers in my mind, a stark contrast to the sharp-edged reality we're walking into now. This is the Sword Dance Festival. To the outside world, it's a celebration of martial grace and noble tradition. To those of us in the thick of it, it's just a glorified arena where the aristocracy parades their egos, carefully maintaining a thin, fragile veil of restraint. We walk through the crowd and the whispers start instantly. They're like vultures circling our status, picking at the scraps of our reputation. They think their judgmental stares hurt. They have no idea how much I enjoy being underestimated. Ulfin leans in, her voice a sharp blade of warning. Do not show them a single crack. She's terrified of being broken, but she does not understand that you cannot break something that's already been forged in hell. The man looks at me, his eyes searching for a flicker of shame or disappointment regarding our standing. I just offer him a slow, sinister smile. Satisfied, I'm just getting started. That laugh, it's the sound of a man who thinks he's already won. It's pathetic, really. It drags me back to the memory of a blade through my chest, the sting of a defeat that was not supposed to happen. But look at me now. 7 wings manifested, a shadow of power they can't even comprehend, walking toward that castle like I'm the one holding the keys to the kingdom. If they want a debut, I'll give them a performance they'll never forget. Let's rewind to the reality of the steel. My opponent lunges, his sword singing a high-pitched note of desperation, but I'm already moving. I catch his blade on the flat of mine, the force vibrating through my arm, but I don't flinch. I pivot, my foot sliding through the dust, and slam the glowing wing emblem on my palm against his guard. The impact ripples outward like a shockwave. He tries to recover, swinging in a wild arc, but I duck under the steel, the cold metal whistling inches above my hair. I surge forward, driving my shoulder into his chest, forcing him off balance before I pivot on my heel and catch his wrist, twisting it until the blade clatters to the stone. He's gasping for air, looking at his own hand, trembling, while mine burns with the heat of a predator that's finally found its rhythm. We reach the balcony, the festival lights glittering like cheap jewelry below. The girls are doing their best to look miserable, probably wishing they were anywhere else. I can't blame them. The air is thick with the scent of perfume and fake smiles. My companion looks at me, her eyes tracking the tension in my jaw. You are nervous, she whispers. Nervous? No, I'm just waiting for the right moment to burn this whole masquerade down. Then comes the old man, playing his part to perfection. He leans in close, his voice a low, calculated hum. Make connections, he says, as if I have not been planning exactly who to destroy first, but keep the wings hidden. As if I'd let these vultures see the true scale of the storm I'm packing under my skin. He leaves, and the silence he leaves behind is deafening. The crowd is watching. I can feel the weight of their judgment, those cold, calculating eyes scanning me for a weakness. They want to see me crawl. Instead, I fix my eyes on a group of young noblemen lounging on a sofa like they own the floorboards. My companion grabs my sleeve, a silent plea to just walk away. I ignore her. I've got a score to settle, and I'm feeling social. I walk right up to Dariz, the ringleader of this little ego trip. I introduce myself, and the look on his face is priceless, a mix of confusion and pure unadulterated arrogance. He and his little pack of sycophants start laughing, sneering about the adopted child of the Elmheim house. They think the label is an insult. They do not realize that in this life, being an outsider is the only way to stay ahead of the curve. As they flap their gums, the faces click into place. Dariz, Gurion, the architects of my previous execution. It's almost cute watching them play at being powerful, aping the adults like children dressing up in oversized suits. They're dead men walking, they just do not know it yet. I turn away bored, the show is not worth the ticket price. Dariz does not like being dismissed. He lunges, his hand shooting out to grab my companion, his fingers closing around her arm with a sharp, ugly grip. I do not hesitate. I move before his synapses can even fire. I snap my hand out, my fingers locking onto her wrist with crushing precision, yanking her out of his reach. I do not look back, my face a mask of stone, my grip firm enough to leave a bruise. He tries to step forward, his face twisting in a snarl of indignity, but I'm already pulling her through the crowd. Let him chase me, let him try to stop me, I'm just getting started. Of course, the red-haired loudmouth couldn't just leave it at that. He's standing there, puffing out his chest like a peacock, mocking the girl's family. He's got this twisted little smirk as he brings up her father, the man who supposedly failed the king and paid for it with his own arm. It's a classic move, kick someone while they're down and pretend it's a public service. The girl's eyes flash with fire, demanding he retract the filth coming out of his mouth. But he's not done. He just leans in closer, his voice dripping with venom before tipping a glass of wine right over her clothes. He tells her she looks better in rags anyway. The crowd watches, waiting to see if she breaks, but the air is getting heavy with something much worse than his petty cruelty. Then the atmosphere shifts. A dark-haired man steps into the room. He's quiet, almost unnervingly still, watching the scene unfold with the kind of calm that precedes a massacre. The red-haired prick doesn't even notice he's standing in the shadow of his own funeral. He's too busy reveling in his little moment of dominance. I call out, cutting through the noise. The red-haired idiot turns, blinking, and before he can even blink, I've snatched the bottle from his hand. I don't sip it, I don't toast him. I just tip the entire neck over his head, drenching his hair and clothes in sticky grape-colored humiliation. He stands there dripping, gasping for air, looking like a total clown. It's not even expensive wine. It's just cheap juice, and he's wearing it like a crown of shame. The memory flashes back 3 years. The air ripples with golden light as I summon the 7 wings. It's not just a technique, it's a manifestation of sheer, unadulterated force. Each wing tears through the atmosphere, glowing with a searing, solar intensity that forces everyone around me to shield their eyes. The ground beneath my feet fractures, spiderwebbing out in a chaotic display of power as the energy cascades outward, a golden gale that leaves the onlookers paralyzed in utter, breathless shock. Back to the present, and the halls of the high and mighty are in a panic. A messenger bursts through the doors, breathless and frantic, announcing that the sons of the main and branch houses are at each other's throats. The noble leaders look at each other, their faces pale. The game they've been playing with their little puppets is spiraling out of control. The woman and an older man reach the training grounds, their footsteps echoing in the sudden, suffocating silence. The crowd is packed tight, necks craning to witness the carnage. In the center, the tension is a physical weight, a thick, suffocating blanket of static electricity that makes the hairs on your arms stand up. The red-haired idiot is back, and he's desperate for validation. He flashes his 4-winged emblem, practically begging the world to notice how special he is. He starts running his mouth again, mocking the dark-haired man like he's already won. The dark-haired man does not even flinch. He just stares back, eyes cold, unimpressed by the cheap parlor trick of an emblem, and tosses a challenge right back into the coward's teeth. The red-haired man snaps. He lunges, a blur of motion, his blade whistling through the air with enough force to cleave bone. But he's slow, painfully slow. The dark-haired man does not retreat. He shifts his weight, his own steel singing as it leaves the scabbard, meeting the strike mid-arc. The blades collide with a violent, metallic shriek, sparks erupting like fireworks as the dark-haired man pivots, his wrist flicking to parry the momentum, sending the red-haired fool stumbling back as the real fight finally begins. A woman shouts out to Aster, her voice cutting through the tension, while a bearded man watches from the sidelines with a look of pure, unadulterated judgment. He does not even bother to hide his disdain, openly mocking Dariz's sword skills as nothing more than the amateur flailing of a child. Suddenly, the air ignites. A shockwave of raw, magical energy rips through the space between them, a violent reminder that in this world, the gap between wing emblem holders is not just a difference in skill, it's a difference in biology. The red-haired fighter lets out a pathetic, ego-driven taunt, desperate to regain his footing. Aster just stands there, calm as a graveyard, inviting him to show whatever pathetic power he's actually hiding. A voice from the crowd calls the match, but it's already irrelevant. Aster closes the distance, his blade meeting the redhead's in a flurry of sparks. He does not even look stressed, just sighs and tells the guy, "You talk way too much." The speed is blinding. Aster shifts, ducking a clumsy horizontal slash before countering with a lightning-fast riposte. He dances around the panicked fighter, weaving in and out of his reach. With a precise, brutal flick of his wrist, Aster drives the pommel of his sword into the man's gut, the impact folding him in half and sending him crashing to his knees, gasping for air. The redhead is spiraling. He tries to stand, but his legs are shaking, the realization finally sinking in that he's hopelessly outclassed. Aster does not even break a sweat, he just stands there, eyes glowing with a cold, dormant power that's finally starting to wake up. The crowd is stunned into silence. Whispers ripple through the stands, they're seeing the true, terrifying weight of House Elmheim's legacy, and it is nothing like the weakling they expected to see. Aster channels his mana, the atmosphere growing heavy and oppressive. The red-haired fighter pales, sweat beading on his forehead as he realizes he's no longer fighting a man but a landslide. Aster lunges, his movement a blur of kinetic violence. He swings, the blade screaming through the air, and connects with a massive explosion of mana that obliterates the remaining defense. The ground shatters beneath the redhead's feet, the shockwave blasting him backward until he's pinned into the dirt, defeated and broken. Aster looms over him, the ultimate picture of condescension. He looks down at the guy, who's practically sobbing in the dirt, and hits him with the final insult, "Get up, cousin." He stands tall, finally shedding the label of the wingless ash for everyone to see. The woman watches from the stands, a slow, knowing smile spreading across her face. But the victory is short-lived. A prickle of instinct runs down Aster's spine. He looks toward the stairs and the air turns freezing. A man is descending, draped in a suffocating blood-red aura that makes the previous fight look like a playground scrap. The crowd is murmuring in fear, their focus shifting from the pathetic, defeated mess on the floor to the new monster entering the arena. The redhead just sits there, ruined and forgot. Aster does not move. He stands his ground, locked in a silent standoff with the red aura threat, the real war about to begin. Duke Roderick doesn't do mercy. He looms over the kneeling youth like a shadow over a grave, listening as the boy pathetically begs his father to use that godlike influence to crush someone else. It's the classic move of the entitled, when you can't win, you call the manager. Roderick doesn't even blink. With a flick of his wrist, he manifests a crushing pressure that pins the boy's hand straight into the stone floor. Bones grind against granite. The Duke leans down, his voice dripping with venom, mocking the kid for his utter inability to do anything but whine while his hand is being turned into paste. Suddenly, the air shifts. A young man bolts forward, screaming for the madness to end. He is not just asking, he's demanding an apology for his sister, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings like a death sentence. The Duke turns, his eyes cold, scanning this nobody. Who does this kid think he is? Up on the balcony, the onlookers go dead silent, leaning over the rails to watch a suicide mission unfold in real time. The young man stands tall, veins popping, jaw set in granite. He spits out his family name like a challenge, refusing to bow, refusing to flinch, and refusing to give the Duke the satisfaction of a retreat. It's pride, raw and stupid, the kind that usually gets people buried, but he does not care. He stares down the barrel of a legend, holding his ground as if his bloodline alone could stop a hurricane. The Duke is not impressed. He sighs, bored by the sheer audacity of the youth, and his hand drops to his hip. The steel clears the scabbard with a sharp, lethal hiss that cuts through the silence, signaling that the talking phase is officially dead. Roderick swings. It is not just a sword strike, it's a localized catastrophe. A shockwave of pure, condensed energy erupts from the blade, tearing through the floorboards and turning the marble beneath them into a jagged crater of debris. But the boy is already moving. He launches himself into the air, a blur of desperate motion, intercepting the Duke's strike mid-swing. Their blades collide with the force of two falling stars, the sound ringing out like a cathedral bell, sparks showering the room in blinding gold. They hit the ground and the earth gives up. The floor explodes into a cloud of dust and shattered rock. The young man lands in the center of the wreckage, his clothes shredded, blood streaming down his face, but he's still standing. He's battered, he's leaking, but he's still breathing. The Duke pauses, his blade held low, watching the kid with a flicker of genuine curiosity. Behind them, the crowd is paralyzed, watching the dust settle on the most insane display of defiance they've ever seen. The real question is not if the boy will fall, it is how much of the building he is going to take down with him when he does. An older man catches Aster before he hits the dirt. The kid is a wreck, blood matting his hair and staining his clothes, but his eyes, they're still burning with that stubborn, suicidal resolve. He gasps out a promise, a vow to keep someone safe, and you realize he's not just fighting for himself, he's shackled to a debt he's determined to pay in blood. Up on the staircase, the vultures are already circling. The high-born types are whispering about the main house, dissecting the Roderick name like it's a carcass they're planning to feast on. They know the math. Aster survived and that changes everything. They're predicting an era of total upheaval, the kind of chaos that makes or breaks empires, and they are terrified that the board has been flipped. A woman rushes in, cradling the broken boy as the older man keeps a grim watch. But Aster isn't resting. He's back on the training floor, moving with a desperate, jagged speed. He feints left, pivots on a dime to dodge a heavy broadsword, and drives a knuckle duster punch right into the solar plexus of the first opponent. He does not stop, following through with a sweeping leg kick that sends the second guard sprawling into the dust. The spectators are watching from the shadows, their voices low and sharp. They're talking about his speed, his tenacity, and that absolute savage beating he handed to Duke Roderick's golden boy. They're starting to see him not as a target, but as a weapon. Aster is testing his limits now, his mana flickering like a dying candle in a windstorm. He slams his fist against a training dummy, the impact sending a shockwave through the yard, testing the weight of the power he's only just beginning to grasp. He exhales, frustration etched into his sweat-slicked face. He knows he could not take Roderick down today. His magic is a wild, untamed beast, and he's constantly on the verge of losing his grip on it, letting the power consume him rather than the other way around. He snaps back into focus, parrying a flurry of steel with a wooden staff, disarming his last opponent with a brutal wristlock and kicking him to the dirt. He stands over them, panting, eyes blazing, and screams, "Who's next?" A woman steps into the yard, her presence cutting through his adrenaline. She tells him to cool it, his father is calling for him. They trade barbs about her attire and the brutal reality of his training. She's observant, maybe too observant, noting how he changes his style to account for his current weaknesses. She promises to be there when he gets back, a rare moment of softness before she turns and leaves him alone in the silence of the yard. Aster cleans himself up and heads for the office. He knocks, enters, and his father gestures to a seat. The air is heavy with the kind of gravity only old men and dead secrets can command. His father leans back, looking at him with a mix of appraisal and weariness. It's been 10 years since he was taken in, and the transition from boy to heir is finally hitting the finish line. The old man pulls a ring from his desk, the metal cold and heavy. He slides it across the wood, declaring it the mark of the next head of the house. He looks Aster dead in the eye and asks the question that changes everything: are you ready to take the reins of this house and own the chaos that's coming? The old man starts laying it out. The Elmheim legacy isn't just a fancy name on a crest, it's a death sentence for the weak. He talks about his daughters coming home, a return that's less of a family reunion and more of a tactical shift in the power balance of the house. Aster isn't exactly thrilled. He knows his sisters are not going to look at his newfound status or his volatile magic and think, oh how sweet. He's still wrestling with his own shadow, terrified that the magic he carries is a wild animal he's got no leash for. The old man watches him, eyes sharp, measuring exactly how much of this kid is going to break under the pressure. Then he drops the heavy hardware on the desk, the demon sword Graham. It's not just a blade, it's a bypass key for the 7 wings, a weapon forged to hold the kind of power that usually turns people into ash. We head to a forest clearing, the air thick with tension. The old man reminds Aster that he has a nasty habit of wrecking everything he touches, so he'd better be careful. He holds up the hilt, just the hilt. It looks like a relic, ancient and dormant, waiting for a heartbeat to wake it up. The old man pours his mana into the metal. The air screams as a crimson blade of pure condensed malice erupts from the hilt, vibrating with such intensity that the ground cracks beneath them. With a singular violent swing, he unleashes a shockwave that shears through the dense timber of the forest, turning trees into kindling and clearing the horizon in a single heartbeat. He hands the hilt to Aster, warning him that the sword does not just cut, it consumes. Aster grips the cold steel, feeling the hum of the weapon against his own mana. Aster does not hold back. He floods the sword with his own raw, unrefined energy. The hilt groans, then erupts. A pillar of blinding, violet-white light tears through the canopy, piercing the clouds and painting the sky in a terrifying display of raw potential that makes the very atmosphere tremble. Miles away, people stop dead in their tracks, staring at the horizon. The sky is burning with Aster's signature energy, a beacon that says, "I am here," loud enough for every enemy of the house to hear. The old man stares at the display, his cynical mask slipping just for a second. He sees it now, the sheer, unchecked magnitude of the boy's talent. It's not just potential, it's a force of nature that makes the legends of old look like parlor tricks. He realizes Aster is not just following in their footsteps, he's set to obliterate them. This is not just an heir anymore, it is a catastrophe in the making. He looks at Aster, the gravity of the situation finally sinking in. He leans in, voice dropping to a gravelly, serious tone. This power, this manifestation of the 7 wings, it's a lightning rod for every jealous, power-hungry vulture in the world. He warns him that from this moment on, every step he takes will be tracked, and every weakness he shows will be exploited by those who want his head on a pike. The old man nods, a rare flicker of approval in his eyes. They lock hands in a firm grip, a silent pact forged in the shadow of the devastation they just caused. Aster makes his vow, he will master this chaos or he will burn with it. 3 days later, the gates open, and the house prepares for the return of the ones who might just burn it all down. The gates creak open and in walks the red-haired prodigal daughter, looking like she's just finished a particularly messy war. She pulls her sisters into a suffocating, bone-crushing embrace that screams "I did not die," while the rest of the family watches from the sidelines. It's that nauseatingly wholesome kind of reunion that makes you want to check your pockets for missing valuables, but for now, the house is just pretending to be a happy family again. She barely lets the air settle before she's zeroing in on the next girl in line, wrapping her in another hug that feels more like a tactical assessment. She keeps her smile tight, but her eyes are already scanning the room, hunting for a specific target. "Where's Aster?" she asks. The tone is not sisterly concern, it's the sound of someone looking for their next sparring partner or their next victim. Deep in the woods, Aster is busy wrestling with a red magic sword that has all the stability of a live grenade. He grips the hilt, veins bulging as the crimson energy leaks out, tearing up the forest floor. He pivots, his boots skidding through the mud as the blade pulls him off balance, the magic humming with a violent, unstable frequency that threatens to snap his arm like a twig. He grits his teeth, forcing the flickering energy to obey, but the sword kicks back, sending a shockwave that shears through the nearby trees. The reunion tour ends abruptly in the clearing. The red-haired woman steps through the brush, her gaze lingering on the carnage Aster just accidentally caused. She does not look shocked, she looks disappointed. They start the talk, the weight of the crest, the expectations of the bloodline, and the inevitable reality that Aster is a walking target. She breaks down the math of their house, survive or be erased. It's the kind of pep talk that usually ends with a funeral, but she's just getting started. Without a word of warning, she draws her steel. The blade whistles through the air, a blur of silver aimed right at Aster's throat. He jerks back, eyes widening as the cold metal grazes his collarbone. He's forced to scramble, dancing backward through the debris, his heart hammering against his ribs as he barely avoids a follow-up strike that slices the air where his head was a millisecond ago. She halts the assault as quickly as she started it, the tip of her blade hovering inches from his chest. She is not here to kill him, just to break his complacency. She sneers, telling him that in the real world, enemies do not wait for him to find his footing. She lectures him on the battlefield mindset that a moment of hesitation is not just a mistake, it's a death sentence. She does not give him time to process the wisdom. She lunges again, channeling a surge of mana into her blade that glows with blinding intensity. The strike hits like a freight train. Aster barely manages to cross his own blade in time, the impact vibrating through his entire skeleton and forcing him to his knees as the ground cracks beneath his boots, desperate to deflect the sheer force of her magical weight. She pushes into his guard, the clash of steel ringing out through the trees. She's mocking him now, shouting over the sound of grinding metal about his pathetic lack of magical control. He tries to push back, but she pivots, using his own strength against him, spinning him around and forcing him to parry a series of rapid, punishing strikes that leave him breathless and reeling. For a split second, the violence fades. The memory hits like a punch to the gut, two kids, wooden swords in hand, smaller, greener, and blissfully unaware of the monsters they were destined to become. But nostalgia does not pay the bills, and it certainly does not stop a blade from carving you open. The red-haired menace snaps back to reality, her steel whistling through the air as she lunges. Aster barely sidesteps, his boots kicking up a spray of dirt as she follows through with a blistering overhead strike. She's fast, she's pissed, and she's shouting about his fitness to lead the house, as if she's the one who gets to decide who survives the coming storm. She hacks at his defenses, a blur of crimson and cold iron, forcing him into a desperate, backpedaling dance through the thickets. From the shadows of the canopy, the observers watch the carnage with eyes that have seen too much. An older man and a woman stand side by side, their faces tight with concern. They are not just watching a sparring match, they're watching a funeral pyre. The rivalry between these two has curdled into something dangerous, and it's only a matter of time before one of them pushes too hard and stops breathing. The man pulls a scroll from his robes, the seal of House Elmheim gleaming like a death warrant. It's a summons. The main house is calling, and the air around the woman turns frigid with realization. She knows what this means for Aster. If he steps into that den of vipers, he might never come out. They're grooming him for a role that's more of a guillotine than a throne, and the dread of losing him, or worse, watching him be consumed, settles over them like a shroud. Back in the clearing, the steel rings out again. She's relentless, her voice cutting through the clatter of blades as she mocks his hesitation. She calls him a coward, a boy afraid of his own shadow, while Aster holds his ground, parrying her blows with teeth gritted against the frustration. He's not avoiding the mantle of successor because he's weak, he's avoiding it because he knows exactly what it costs. She calls it duty, he calls it a death sentence. Every word is a jab, every movement a calculated insult to his very existence, turning their fight into a bitter debate of steel and spite. Then she stops playing. With a violent shove, she breaks his guard, her shoulder slamming into his chest with the force of a battering ram. Aster stumbles back, gasping, but she's already there. She drives her palm into his chest, her magic flaring in a blinding violet discharge that sends him skidding across the forest floor. She stands over him, radiating a disdain that cuts deeper than any blade, lamenting his pathetic, stubborn refusal to embrace the raw power he is so clearly terrified of. She gestures to the wing emblem on his chest, then her own, the disparity in their magical resonance screaming for attention. She questions his resolve, her voice dropping into a dangerous, low register. Is he afraid? Is he still haunted by the last time he lost control? She digs at the trauma he's been trying to bury, twisting the knife of his own insecurity. She wants him to break, to snap, to show her the monster she knows is hiding underneath that stoic, stubborn mask. She lunges, a blur of motion intended to end the fight once and for all. But Aster is not just taking it anymore. As her blade descends, he does not dodge, he focuses. Every ounce of his internal mana surges, concentrating at the point of impact. The clash is deafening, a shockwave of raw magical energy erupting between them, blowing back the surrounding brush and forcing her to reel from the sudden, violent recoil. He is not done. He drops his sword, the metal clattering to the dirt, and lunges forward with nothing but his bare hands and a desperate, wild look in his eyes. She prepares to counter, expecting a strike, a spell, anything, but he's closing the distance with a speed that defies logic, turning his body into a projectile. He's gambling everything on this split-second opening, and for the first time the look on her face is not mockery, it's fear. You'd think having a second shot at life would make a guy soft, but staring into her eyes, I'm just reminded of what it costs to stay on top. My family, the power I've bled for, the ghosts I've buried, it all converges right here. She's looking at me like she's finally realizing the predator in the room isn't the one holding the sword. I don't give her time to process the existential dread. I summon a torrent of crimson mana, a violent, swirling vortex of red energy that tears through the air. She tries to blink away, vanishing into a blur of displacement, but I track her movement instantly. I pivot, channeling every ounce of my intent into a follow-up strike. My fist ignites with a concentrated blast of pure heat, tearing through the space she occupied a millisecond ago. I'm not playing defense anymore, I'm forcing her to face the reality that I can end this whenever I choose. I pull the final trigger, the air screaming as my magic surges toward her, only to halt inches from her skin. She wakes up in a bed that feels way too soft, the confusion rolling off her in waves. Marfa is there, hovering with that infuriatingly calm expression. Apparently I did not kill her, I just put her to sleep. She's staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together how a sparring match turned into a one-way ticket to dreamland while I walked away without a scratch. The memory hits her, the red light, the sheer crushing weight of my intent, and that final moment where I just stopped. She realizes it was not a mistake, it was a demonstration. I was holding back a cataclysm, and the realization sends a genuine shiver down her spine. It's the look of someone who finally understands that the power gap is not just wide, it's a chasm. She's fuming, ready to demand answers, her face twisting in frustration. She turns to Marfa, expecting me to be cowering in the corner, but the room is empty. Marfa just sighs, letting her know I've been gone for hours. The frustration turns to pure, unadulterated shock. She's just finding out the news I've been summoned to the main house. She did not even know it was on the table, and now, the gravity of what that means for our little power dynamic is starting to sink in. The carriage ride is quiet, save for the dry, gravelly voice of the old man sitting across from me. We're talking about the Elmheim Elders, a group of people who treat human lives like disposable assets. They don't just punish failure, they erase it. If you stain the family name, you do not just lose your status, you lose your existence. He looks at me with that mix of pity and professional concern, asking if I'm ready for what's waiting at the end of the road. I lean back, looking out at the passing landscape, and tell him the only thing that matters, do not bother trying to save me. I've survived hell once, I do not need a chaperone for the sequel. The carriage is still rolling, but a sudden shadow streaks across the path beside us. She's there, lungs burning, having sprinted the entire distance just to catch up to the moving wheels. She's panting, red hair wild from the run, staring at me like I've lost my mind. The summons to the main house is not an invitation to tea, and she knows it. It's a death warrant wrapped in silk, and she's terrified I'm walking straight into the executioner's blade. I just shrug. She's fuming, calling out my special treatment, acting like the world is unfair because I'm dancing on the edge of a cliff while she's still learning to walk. It's cute, really. I tell her to relax, my safety is not her problem to solve. She keeps rattling off reasons why I'm an idiot, her face flushed with frustration. But behind the anger, it's just nerves. She's my sister and she's worried I will not be coming back to settle our unfinished business. She stares me down, dead serious, promising a rematch the second I return. I guess I'll have to survive just to wipe that smug look off her face. She turns and walks away, the carriage rattling on without her. I watch her go, a genuine smile forming, a rival, a sibling, and a headache all in one. Thanks, I mutter under my breath, watching her figure shrink into the distance. The gates loom ahead, massive, cold, and dripping with the kind of ancient authority that makes your skin crawl. 2 guards block the path, their armor gleaming with the family crest. They do not even pretend to be polite, they grab us, insisting on an escort straight to the Grand Elder. The castle walls are a trip down memory lane, the kind of nostalgia that leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. I'm scanning the corridors, remembering every secret, every trap. My companion keeps whispering, stay calm, do not get hot-headed, as if I'm some ticking time bomb. Maybe I am. He starts whining about Dariz, the guy whose hand got crushed like a dry leaf. A little collateral damage, honestly. He's terrified that I'll lose my cool again. I give him a look that promises silence, though we both know how well that usually goes. We step into the grand hall, the air heavy with centuries of suffocating tradition. We hit the floor, kneeling before the throne. A voice cuts through the silence, Zenith A. Elmheim. It's been 10 years, but that voice still sounds like a funeral bell. Zenith sits there, surrounded by the heavy hitters of the house, the kind of people who turn empires into dust for sport. You can feel the sheer weight of their mana pressing down on the room, trying to force us to break. It's not just a meeting, it's a show of force. I do not waste time on pleasantries. I look up and ask, where's Roderick? The room goes deathly quiet. The Grand Elder does not even blink, dismissing the question with a wave of his hand. The head of the knights is busy, he says. Convenient, right? I'm scanning the room, counting the executives, measuring their power levels, and calculating exactly how many of them I'd have to gut to make an exit. Zenith leans forward, his eyes locking onto mine, and drops the real bomb, the sword dance festival incident. He knows. And by the look on his face, he's not just looking for an explanation, he's looking for a confession. My yellow eyes flare, reflecting the sheer arrogance in the room. These relics in high chairs are obsessed with the sanctity of the Elmheim name, acting like my banishment is some grand moral crusade to scrub a stain off their precious reputation. They're talking about my life like it's a ledger entry they can just balance out. I tell them the truth that I acted alone to shield my father, but it's like talking to a brick wall. They don't want the truth, they want a scapegoat. They start lecturing me on discipline, those crusty fossils, as if their bureaucratic stagnation is the gold standard for power. They pivot to the politics of the Elmheim Knights, squabbling over internal rivalries like vultures circling a carcass. They're so terrified of losing their grip that they demand I prove I will not turn on the house. The irony is suffocating. They're so busy guarding their seats that they don't realize they're already sitting on a powder keg. Then comes the clown in the red cloak. He pulls out a glowing blade, dragging up a ghost of a past incident where an arm was lost, a pathetic attempt at a scare tactic. He points the steel at me, his voice dripping with false authority as he orders my head to be taken. I do not even blink. I tell them I'd rather face death than raise a hand against my own kin. I drive the butt of my staff into the stone floor, the impact sending a shockwave of mana rippling through the hall, cracking the foundation beneath their feet. The red-cloaked fool doesn't hesitate. He screams the order for my execution. Steel shrieks against steel as the knights swarm in, drawing their blades and closing the circle, their eyes wide with the adrenaline of a kill they think is already guaranteed. I look at these trembling elders, these masters of the house, and I start to laugh. Fine, I sneer, you want a monster. Let me show you what you are actually dealing with. I rip my shirt open, exposing my back to the light, and the red emblem etched into my skin ignites, pulsing with a terrifying, ancient heat. The room goes dead silent. The knights freeze, their swords hovering in midair. The elders' faces go white, not pale, asterisk deathly white. They know what that mark is. The 7 wings. They start bickering, scrambling to deny what they're seeing, desperate to convince themselves it's a forgery. I lean back, soaking in their panic. What's wrong? I taunt. Surprised that the stray dog you tried to put down has teeth that can tear your world apart. A man in the audience erupts into a manic laugh. The history books are being rewritten in their heads in real time. That symbol is not just a tattoo, it's an organ, a biological engine for raw, destructive mana. They're realizing that the Spirit Clan legend is not just a fairy tale told to children to keep them in line, it's standing right in front of them, breathing down their necks. The guy in the red cloak finally stops posturing, his eyes darting between my back and the exit, the reality of the threat sinking into his marrow. I lock eyes with him, my grin cold enough to freeze their blood. So I whisper, the silence heavy with the threat of total annihilation, are you going to keep playing executioner, or are you finally going to realize that declaring war on me is the last mistake you'll ever make? I stand there bare-chested and exposed, a walking target in a room full of sharks. They're looking at the markings on my skin like they're reading a map to a treasure they don't deserve. The air is thick with the stench of political rot. These nobles, the 7 wings, they're terrified of a civil war, but they're too arrogant to realize they're the ones holding the match. They think they can curb my influence with red tape and empty threats, not realizing that I'm the only thing keeping this powder keg from blowing their entire legacy into ash. The Grand Elder lets out a dry, wheezing laugh that sounds like grinding gravel. He mocks my claims, eyes squinted in that pathetic, age-old condescension. He thinks he's the top of the food chain, a relic of a dying order. I don't even blink. I just step forward, my voice cutting through his smugness like a blade. You doubt the weight of my power, I ask, my lips curling into a jagged smile. Then stop hiding behind your title. If you're so sure I'm a fraud, come down here and kill me yourself. Count Maze, that snake in a silk suit, pipes up. He doesn't want blood on his own hands, not yet anyway. He suggests a trial. A nice, sanitized way to watch me die without getting his knuckles bruised. The Grand Elder nods, that thin, crooked smile spreading across his face. It's a setup, of course. a test of strength designed to prove I'm either a god or a corpse. The elder turns on his heel, his robes swishing with self-importance. He motions for me to follow. He's already decided the outcome, leading me like a lamb to the slaughter, expecting me to stumble. I trail behind him, ignoring the whispers of the sycophants in the gallery. They think they've cornered a beast, but they've just invited a predator into their sanctuary. We descend deep into the bowels of the estate, into an underground bunker where the light goes to die. The air is stagnant, heavy with the metallic tang of old blood and ancient, rotting magic. The elder stops, pointing toward a massive, reinforced containment unit. The trial is not a duel, it is a disposal. He wants me to face a magic beast, a gluttonous nightmare kept in the dark to eat the evidence of their dirty work. I stand at the threshold of the cage, the iron bars cold under my touch. Behind me, Count Maze is watching with that trademark, oily smirk of his, convinced he's about to witness my end. He's already mentally composing my obituary. I do not look back, I just step into the shadow. The darkness inside is absolute, suffocating, until the scraping of claws against stone cuts the silence. I can feel the beast's eyes on me, hollow, hungry, and ancient. Above, the spectators crowd the viewing deck, peering down like they're watching a gladiator match. They're waiting for the scream, for the spray of red. They don't realize that the moment I stepped inside, the cage stopped being my prison and started being their tomb. Without warning, the beast erupts from the gloom, a blur of fur and fangs. It lunges, teeth snapping inches from my throat, but I'm already moving. I shift my weight, a clean sidestep that leaves the monster slamming into the stone wall with a bone-shaking crash. It doesn't even have time to recover before I'm pivoting, driving a concentrated blast of mana into its flank, sending it skidding across the floor. The beast stumbles, but then it starts to change. It's not just a monster anymore, it's stitching itself back together with necrotic energy. Black bile leaks from its joints as its skin slews off to reveal the jagged gray bone of the undead. It's a mutation, a forced evolution fueled by forbidden arts. It shrieks, a sound that shreds the nerves as it grows in size, its claws extending into lethal, serrated blades. A collective gasp ripples through the nobles above. They recognize it now. This is not just a beast, it's a living graveyard. The Grand Elder does not even flinch. He explains it with the casual indifference of a janitor talking about trash disposal. This creature was designed to consume corpses so they would not have to deal with the messy reality of their own murders. They're horrified not by the monster, but by the fact that it's finally being fed something that might actually fight back. The creature surges forward again, a mountain of rot and malice. I stand my ground, mana flaring around my hands like liquid fire. The Grand Elder watches from the shadows, his expression unreadable, utterly unbothered by the possibility of my death. He thinks this is the end of the line for me. He has no idea that I'm just getting warmed up. High above the carnage, tucked away behind iron bars, a man with light hair watches with a cold, detached curiosity. He's not rooting for anyone, he's just waiting to see who gets erased. Down in the dirt, I'm putting my blade through the beast's flank, but it's like cutting through wet sand. My sword sinks in, the flesh ripples, and then nothing. The wound seals before I can even pull the steel back out. The lion thing roars, a sound like grinding tombstones, and swipes a claw that shatters the stone floor inches from my face. My slashes are doing zero damage, just pissing it off. Undead, of course it's undead. You want to kill something that refuses to stay dead, you need sunlight or holy fire, and unless I'm suddenly a priest, I'm going to have to improvise. Screw the fancy footwork. I channel every ounce of mana I've been hoarding, letting it roar through my veins like liquid magma. I slam my hands onto the ground and the floor does not just crack, it detonates. A shockwave of raw, unfiltered magical energy erupts, turning the arena floor into a crater and sending a tidal wave of debris screaming toward the ceiling. The nobles behind the bars look like they've seen a ghost. Their jaws are practically scraping the floor, eyes wide, wondering if I actually pulled it off. Spoiler, I'm not done yet. Dust settles, but the beast is still standing, its hide charred but eyes burning with fresh hate. It lunges, a blur of fur and rot, slamming its massive weight into my chest. I'm pinned under those gore-slicked claws, the pressure threatening to liquefy my ribs. It opens its maw, the stench of 1,000 graves hitting me point blank, ready to end this. Lord Highfried is leaning against the bars, his brow furrowed, whispering to the light-haired man. They're debating if this is the moment the experiment finally breaks, or if they should step in before I become a permanent part of the floorboards. They're so concerned with their little game, they do not see the smirk on my face. The trap is set. I channel my technique, and a blade of pure concentrated energy manifests right through the beast's shoulder. It shrieks as the light sears its unnatural flesh, black blood spraying like a geyser across the arena. The beast staggers, its regeneration stalling as my energy eats away at the corruption holding it together. I don't give it a second to recover. I'm on it, a whirlwind of dark energy and violence. My blade carves deep, jagged arcs through its hide, tearing muscle from bone. I'm shredding this monster, turning that legendary beast into a pile of mangled, twitching scrap. The very foundations of the arena are screaming now, masonry crumbling as the shockwaves of our fight tear the architecture apart. The nobles are scrambling, fleeing their high horse seats while I stand in the center of the wreckage, bathed in the red glow of my own killing intent. They look down from the ledge, paralyzed. They came for a show and now they're watching a slaughter. They can't believe the sheer output, the terrifying ease with which I just dismantled their invincible pet. The Grand Elder nods to the light-haired man. The look in his eyes isn't fear, it's an appraisal. He's seen enough. The beast is dead, the arena is a ruin, and I've officially checked every box on their sick little trial. Light-haired man leans over the edge, his voice cutting through the ringing silence of the debris. Enough, Aster, he calls down. You've passed. Get up here. I walk into the room and the air is thick with the smell of old paper and ancient egos. The Grand Elder is waiting, trying to rope me into the main house's messy succession drama. He's looking for a pawn, some fresh blood to tip the scales. I don't care about their inheritance, their titles, or their crumbling dynasty. I make it clear I'm not playing their game. The old man's eyes narrow, shifting from polite interest to something sharper. He starts digging, implying he knows about the resentment simmering under my skin. He's testing the waters, poking at my hostility toward House Elmheim. He's not outright accusing me, not yet, but he's definitely trying to see if I'm the kind of bomb that's about to go off in his living room. I decide to flip the script. I drop a question about the rebels, watching his composure crack just a fraction. The temperature in the room drops. He leans forward, his voice dropping into a low, jagged warning. Do not bare your fangs at me again, boy. A classic power move, but he's forgotten one thing: I'm not a dog on a leash. I walk out, leaving that suffocating office behind. A man is waiting, expecting me to have jumped at the chance to join the inner circle. When I tell him I flat out refused, he looks like I just slapped him. The look of pure disbelief on his face is almost worth the headache. Count Maze steps in, and instead of being angry, he just laughs. A dry, knowing sound that echoes off the stone walls. He looks at me, eyes glinting with a weird mix of amusement and calculation, and drops the title, Child of the Seven Wings. It's an official declaration, and it hangs in the air like a death sentence. He explains what that name actually carries. It's not an honor, it's a target. Everyone with a sword or a secret is going to be coming for me now. He wants me in the Knight Academy, clearly hoping to keep his pet monster on a short, observable leash. He thinks he's guiding the future, but he's just throwing me into a shark tank. I'm weighing my options, looking at Maze and wondering how much of his help is just a trap. He offers to escort me home, casually mentioning he's going to tell my mother about my little bloodbath in the arena. It's a threat wrapped in a favor. I'm starting to realize that in this place, nobody does anything for free. Far away in a room that feels like a tomb, a knight commander is bowing. He's reporting the death of a young master, a casualty of the very trial I just walked out of. The Lord listening does not blink. He knew. He's been tracking the Seven Wings signature for a long time, watching it develop like a dormant disease in the house's bloodline. The Lord does not care about the power struggle in Elmheim. He's a predator watching the food chain rearrange itself. He waves off the concerns, his voice cold and detached. He's content to let me run, let me grow, let me think I'm free. He's playing the long game, waiting for the moment when my power is finally ripe enough to be harvested for his own ends. He's not worried about the chaos, he's just waiting for the fruit to fall. 4 years, the world moves on, and I show up at the Knight Academy entrance exam. The crowd parts when they see me, the whispers following me like a shadow. They've heard the stories, the rumors of what I did back then. They're looking at me like I'm a freak of nature, and honestly, they're not wrong. I stand at the desk, pen in hand, signing away my liability. The official looks up, bored, and asks to see the wing emblem. It's time to show them exactly what I've brought to the table. The guy with the purple hair freezes at the mention of the name. Elmheim. It carries weight, like a funeral shroud you can't quite shake off, and my yellow eyes are already scanning the crowd, weighing the odds of just using this guy's face as a stepping stone to get through the gate. I step into the venue, and the air is thick with the stench of desperate, over-caffeinated teenagers. Before I can even find a spot, Vigor Smates, a guy who clearly spent more time on his hair than his combat training, stomps up to me. He takes one look at my gear and starts in on the usual look at this loser routine, clearly convinced he's the main character of this little circus. He keeps yapping, calling me a fledgling, a nobody, a waste of space. But the crowd is quieter now. The whispers start bubbling up from the back. Elmheim, they mutter, the name tasting like ash in their mouths. The realization hits them like a physical blow. The rumors were not just stories, they were warnings. And here I am standing right in the middle of their little playground. Then comes Gurion, my dear, sweet cousin. He saunters over with that classic main house arrogance, acting like he's doing me a favor just by existing in my vicinity. He's got that condescending smirk down to an art, mocking my background, mocking my path, trying to remind me that no matter how hard I climb, I'm still just the dirt under his polished boots. He leans in, his voice dropping to a toxic whisper as he spits on the memory of Dariz. It's the kind of casual cruelty that only people who think they're untouchable can muster. He warns me, do not underestimate the main house, Aster. As if I'm the one playing a game, as if he has any clue what's actually coming for him. The onlookers are practically vibrating with second-hand embarrassment now. Vigor, poor, loud, stupid Vigor, finally connects the dots. The name, the face, the reputation. The color drains right out of his face, his jaw hitting the floor as the realization that he's been barking at a wolf sets in. He's not laughing anymore. A booming voice cuts through the tension. The Knight Commander, perched high in the tower like a judge handing down a death sentence, addresses the masses. No mercy, he says. Treat this like a battlefield. He's not looking for talent, he's looking for survivors. I look up at the tower, but in my mind's eye I see him, Roderick A. Elmheim, the General Commander. The man who cast the shadow I've been living under for 4 years. I'm not here to play knight. I'm not here for the glory. I'm here to settle the score, and I'm going to tear this exam apart to do it. The air shrieks. The trial of the Arrow Tower does not start with a whistle, it starts with a massacre. Black, iron-tipped spears scream down from the sky, slamming into the earth with enough force to shatter bone. A guy next to me does not even get to scream before a projectile pins him to the ground, his life ending in a violent, crimson splatter. Pure chaos, the examinees are not soldiers, they're prey. They scramble, tripping over each other in a desperate, pathetic attempt to flee. The veterans, the ones who think they're clever, try to huddle up, overlapping their shields, hoping a wall of steel will save them. They don't realize that against this kind of barrage, they're just making themselves a bigger target. High above, the commander watches the carnage with the cold, bored eyes of a man counting livestock. Below, the sky is a falling forest of death, but I do not move, I do not flinch. I just stand there, calm as a grave, as the spears whistle inches from my head, carving the air around me. They want a survivor, let's see how many of them are left when I'm done. A wall of steel descends, but I do not move an inch. With a flick of my wrist, I tear a rift in the air, manifesting a swirling barrier of crimson energy that erupts outward like a blooming, jagged flower. The arrows hit the veil and simply vanish, shattered into splintered confetti by the sheer density of the aura. The surrounding candidates stop dead in their tracks, mouths agape, watching the death rain evaporate against the impossible glow of my defense. I do not drop the guard, I amplify it. The red light pulses, turning the air around me into a pressurized vacuum where nothing, not a stray bolt, not a jagged shard, can survive. The projectiles are pulverized into dust before they can even graze my sleeve. The onlookers aren't just watching anymore, they're terrified, whispering about the raw, unchecked power radiating from someone they thought was just another nameless grunt. They're finally realizing the gap between them and me is not a bridge, it's a canyon. The instructor finally decides to end the slaughter, clearing his throat like he's bored of the carnage. He announces that the lucky survivors have passed the first round, gesturing for us to drag ourselves to the next venue. As we walk, my companions are already grumbling about the instructor's lack of humanity, but the real talk is happening behind us. The other examinees are stealing glances, eyes wide, trying to figure out how I'm not even breaking a sweat after turning the sky into a scrap heap. A quick flash of memory tells me everything, a noble sneering in the shadows, ordering his lackey Gurion to bury me. They're terrified of me becoming a knight, desperate to keep the status quo of their pathetic little house intact. We're ordered to hand over our personal blades for generic, mass-produced steel. For fairness, they say, right, I've seen enough rigged games to know when the dealer is hiding an ace. There's no such thing as an even playing field when the people running the show want you dead. Gurion steps up, his voice dripping with that classic, arrogant entitlement. He mocks my retainer, warns me about the dangers of crossing his house, and tries to puff out his chest like he's not just another pawn. It's almost adorable how much he thinks a little status gives him teeth. The instructor cuts the tension, explaining the second exam, a flag capture game in the deep woods. He adds a detail that makes the air turn cold. The swords we were just forced to trade for, they are not just for defense. They're legal permits to kill. A thick, acrid cloud of smoke erupts into the sky, a signal fire that turns the forest into a slaughterhouse. The silence breaks instantly as the candidates bolt, the sound of steel drawing from scabbards echoing through the trees. Panic settles in like a rot. The others are trembling, whispering about House Elmheim and the legendary, horrific massacres they leave in their wake. They show us a vision, a glimpse of what happens when you cross those bastards, a field of broken bodies and silent screams. They think that vision is meant to keep us in line. They don't realize they've just handed me a license to hunt. Some green-clad lackey tries to feed me a line, but I'm already moving, putting distance between me and the small talk as I sprint across the open field. I remember the red-coated prick tracing a route on the map like it was a game of chess, and then the look on the green-clad guy's face, a mixture of pity and calculated malice. The silence in these woods is not peaceful, it's a held breath, a predator waiting for the right moment to snap my neck. I'm running, but my mind is already dissecting the trap. Then, I run into a blonde guy holding a yellow flag, acting like we're out for a leisurely stroll, practically begging me to keep him company. But the second I spot the red flag hidden in his grip, the air turns sour, and the sound of approaching boots confirms it. I've walked straight into an ambush. Steel meets steel with a violent jar as I parry his opening strike, the force vibrating up my arm. I shove him back, teeth bared, demanding to know just how deep he's buried his morals in the dirt for House Elmheim. He doesn't answer, he just lunges, his blade whistling toward my throat, and I have to pivot, narrowly sliding under his guard before slamming my pommel into his ribs. It's a dance we've played before, but the spectators are not watching for skill, they're waiting for one of us to drop so they can collect the bounty. As we trade rapid, bone-shaking strikes, he laughs, explaining his pathetic little plan to sell us out just to curry favor with the main house. His blade arcs downward, and I catch it, the sparks blinding me for a split second. My mind drifts to my allies, a momentary lapse that almost costs me my life. He capitalizes, bringing his weapon down in a crushing overhead blow that sends a spiderweb of fractures racing across my blade. My sword is a piece of garbage, and he knows it. He presses the advantage, raining down heavy, rhythmic blows that threat to shatter my steel into 1,000 useless shards. I'm forced to dance backward, parrying at the last possible millisecond, the shrieking grind of metal on metal deafening as I struggle to keep my weapon from disintegrating entirely. I pivot, throwing a frantic feint that buys me a sliver of space, and I bolt, leaving him behind to bark his smug, hollow taunts at my retreating back. He picks up a jagged fragment of my broken steel, and the realization hits him that was not just bad luck, it was an Elmheim sabotage job. I reach the camp, adrenaline still burning, only to find the soldiers waiting, blades drawn, ready to turn my arrival into an execution. While my life is currently hanging by a thread, this blonde prick is sitting on a wall like he's at a garden party, calmly discussing how to secure the third base. Gurion steps out of the shadows, his face a mask of cold fury, demanding to know what these cowards did to his brothers in arms. The blonde guy does not even blink. He just gestures, and before Gurion can blink, a subordinate is behind him, driving a blade deep into his back. The coward leans in, whispering a sneer about how Elmheim doesn't tolerate defiance. The blonde man lets out a hollow, arrogant laugh. He's already measuring the battlefield for his own grave, convinced he's won the war without breaking a sweat. He starts droning on about victory conditions, waving his hands like he's teaching a class. He mocks Gurion's lack of manpower, laughing at the idea that anyone left could possibly hold their flags against his superior numbers. Gurion does not look like a dying man, he looks like a storm waiting to break. He vows to butcher the lot of them, and for the first time the subordinates actually stumble back in genuine primal fear. The blonde guy just rolls his eyes, calling it a pathetic bluff. Then the impossible happens. Gurion does not collapse, he reaches back, his fingers ironclad, and grips the blade still protruding from his own spine. With a sickening metallic screech that sets the teeth on edge, he snaps the tempered steel in half like it's a dry twig. The blade clatters to the ground, and the color drains from the blonde man's face as the reality of who he just provoked finally sets in. Silence hangs heavy in the air. Gurion stands tall, breathing through the pain, an absolute wall of defiance. The subordinates look at their commander, then at the blood-stained monster in front of them, their feet rooted to the mud in paralyzing hesitation. The tides have turned, and it's pathetic to watch. The blonde commander is on his knees now, clutching his side, his face twisted in a mask of impotent rage and humiliation. His men hover around him, looking less like a strike force and more like a group of lost children wondering if they're next on the chopping block. Out of the chaos steps Nalan. He stares down the kneeling wreck of a man who is still shrieking orders, demanding to know why his own reinforcements are just standing there watching the carnage. The blonde man barks at Nalan to finish the job, to kill Gurion, but Nalan does not move. He looks at the blade on the ground and then at the commander with pure, unadulterated disgust. He tells him straight, there's no honor in this, and he won't soil his sword for a man whose idea of knighthood is a knife in the back. Then the bomb drops. Nalan turns his back on the pathetic commander and announces the alliance is dead. His own teammates look like they've just been told the sky is falling. They stammer, questioning his loyalty, their faces pale as if they're realizing their golden ticket just walked out the door. Nalan does not waste time on a rebuttal. He snaps, his hand blurring to his hip, and draws a blade that pulses with a blinding, ethereal light. He lunges, a streak of raw kinetic energy cutting through the air, closing the gap in a heartbeat. His opponent does not flinch. A jagged surge of crimson energy erupts from his feet, slamming into the floorboards and shattering the stone into 1,000 jagged shards. The shockwave ripples outward, sending debris flying and leaving Nalan staggered, his momentum completely obliterated by the sheer force of the counter. Nalan finds his footing, eyes cold and calculating. He stares the man down, cutting through the tension with a simple, brutal truth. There's only room for one team at the finish line, and it's time to stop playing games and decide who actually deserves to cross it. The mood shifts, the opponent drops the hostility, his expression softening into something strangely expectant. He admits he wants Nalan in the Royal Knights, a high-stakes recruitment pitch delivered in the middle of a war zone. It's a bizarre, tense standoff where ambition clashes with ideology. Then comes the real kicker, he reveals he's got a plan to get everyone through this mess alive. The onlookers go dead silent, their confusion replaced by a mix of shock and skepticism. It's the kind of move that either makes you a legend or a fool. He holds out a hand, a gesture of peace toward his rival, Gurion. It's an olive branch dipped in ego, an invitation to bury the hatchet and rewrite the rules of the game together. Suddenly, the silence is shattered by the screeching of a proctor losing his mind over flag-raising protocols. While the man throws a tantrum, Nolan calmly breaks down the strategy. Why fight for crumbs when you can occupy every base and own the entire board? The proctor is fuming, arguing that knights do not just hold hands and skip to victory. But Nolan does not bite. He hits back with a cold, philosophical jab, reminding the old man that a living enemy is always more useful than a dead one. Strategy, not slaughter. The proctor tries to pull rank, but Nolan just stares right through him, questioning his authority with such casual indifference that the man actually chokes on his own words. He's left sputtering, face beet red, completely unable to form a coherent thought as the protagonist systematically dismantles his worldview. The group retreats to the quiet of a holding room, the air thick with the smell of stale sweat and uncertainty. They're pacing, whispering, obsessing over the math of the exam, and trying to parse out whether Nolan is a genius or if they've all just signed their own death warrants. They corner him, demanding to know if this gamble is actually going to pay off. Before he can answer, the heavy doors groan open. A messenger steps in, face unreadable, and drops the news: the headmaster is ready. The results are in.